How exciting. All right. Hey, everybody. Welcome to the new feature review. Hopefully everybody can hear me. I don't have any way to get confirmation from you, so we'll roll with it. Looks like I am sharing my screen, so send me a message in Teams if you can't hear me, or if you know you don't see the screen share. So we'll dive right into it. So to start out with, right, obviously we're here for the new feature review for the month of July. So this is the release that went out this Tuesday, a few days ago. So there's, as always, quite a few good updates in here. So we'll kind of run through the release notes. We'll show off some stuff in Fuse. And as always, if there are questions, it seems like there's a system in the webinar for you to kind of raise your hand or ask Q&A. So you can try out those new features. This is I've never used this platform before, so might figure it out as we go, but it'll be fun. So the first part of this, we're going to be showing off some significant updates to the device gateway. So to give a little bit of background, the update process for the device gateway has always been sort of a manual situation where somebody would kind of go to the Fuse apps page in Fuse, download the latest version, the latest installer, and then run that to go ahead and update the device gateway. Over time, we've implemented quite a few improvements. So now there's a process where the updates are kind of internal in the application, where it'll prompt you to say, there's a new version, would you like to update? And it will kind of handle all of that automatically internally. But from there is still some improvements that we could make to streamline the process and really make it as painless as possible for administrators. So the first thing that we've done is kind of made some tweaks to the device gateways page. This is the screen in Fuse. So we've added a color coding to the application version column, nice and colorful. So what that means is green is that gateway is running the latest version. So it's up to date, good to go. Orange means it's running a version that is not the latest, but is still within our last 3 versions support window. So, it could be updated, but it's still supported. And then red means that it's outside our support window and, really needs to be updated urgently. There's also another column on this table, which is not in the screenshot, that just indicates whether there's an update available, which sort of ties into that application version column. So that'll be really great for especially customers who have a lot of gateways or are just kind of trying to keep track of what needs to be updated. They can kind of pop over to the screen and get a nice color-coded list and kind of easily identify the things that are priority. So that's a good update just to increase visibility and help people understand what needs attention. But then once you've identified that something needs attention, we've made a few improvements on how you can apply an update. So first of all, there is now a system for initiating an update on a gateway from Fuse remotely through the Fuse website. So the way this is currently done is through the gateway function button. So if you drill into a gateway, we can have Cody demo some of this. He's along for the ride here, but I'll talk through it for a moment first. If you drill into a gateway and then click the run button, you can then apply an update remotely. And you can specify whether you want to install just the gateway bundle or just drivers or both. And that way, administrators don't need to log into the PC or RDP in order to apply an update. And then we may make this button a little bit more, we may kind of pull this up to like a top level button or something, maybe in the table to let people update multiple gateways at once. We can make some improvements like that over time to make this easier. But for now, this is the method to let people kind of play around with the function without immediately putting it in front of everybody. So it'll probably sit like this for a month or so. So give it a try and let us know how it works. And then there's also, to kind of talk about the next point before I let Cody do a quick demo. the natural next question is, great, okay, now I can remotely apply an update. What if I just don't want to bother, right? Don't want to be bothered to apply updates. Why can't it just update itself? And the answer now is that it can. So the device gateway, this is of course for any gateway versions. All of these, the remote updates and the update option, I should point out, apply to versions after this month, right? So you're obviously not going to be able to remotely update an old gateway version because it requires code in the gateway in order for that to work. So there would still be a manual update required to get it to version 2023.7, and then from there we can use these features. Anyway, there's now an option in the configuration for the gateway. This is both in Fuse and in the gateway setup screen itself to auto update. So you check a box, and then from there it will automatically apply updates when it finds them. So for small companies, for companies that maybe don't want to be bothered with keeping track of when updates are available and applying those, I think this will be a great feature. Large companies that want to retain control over what updates when, they may still want to leave this off. It is opt-in, so by default it is disabled, kind of mimic how it's always behaved. But at least for those companies where maybe they don't have an IT staff, or the IT staff is 1 or 2 people, I think this will be a great feature. So now that I've talked a lot about it, are you here and available to do a quick screen share, Cody? I cannot hear you if you are talking. Microphone problems? Let's see. Yeah. Know quite how this works.
Oh, yeah, he does have microphone problems.
Yep.
Yep.
Well, if you want to fiddle with that for a minute, maybe we can figure that out. But we were basically just going to have Cody kind of step through and show you, especially the remote update process and the configuration option, kind of where those things live in Fuse. Kind of click through the screens rather than just have screenshots, and then kind of show you what happens when you run those functions. So, it's not critically important if he's not able to get in here, but that's kind of unfortunate. There's some audio setup stuff that's different for this.
Yeah.
System,
so we do have a question from the audience, Lance.
Oh, amazing! All right.
Yes, we have questions pouring in from all over the globe. What confirmation do we get if successful or failure?
I'm assuming this is about the remote update option. So it will give you the same kind of notification that the other device functions will. So it'll give you a nice red snack bar or a green snack bar. There are, I'm not entirely sure how it behaves if something goes catastrophically wrong during the update. Yeah, that was going to be, that's your next question. Yeah, that's a question that I think I'll want to bounce off Cody. But as I understand, basically all the update really does is download the new bundle of the gateway and then just restart the service so that it runs the new bundle. So I don't think it will automatically roll back at this point. It's kind of a challenging concept, but it's something that we could look into. It's a good question. Realistically, the updates are very simple. Really, what it's doing is not actually that complicated. So I don't think there's a lot that can go wrong, aside from maybe just having an entirely broken version of the system, or version of the gateway, which doesn't happen or shouldn't happen. So,
is there a possibility to add some type of a like mass gateway update function for companies?
Yeah.
That have 300 gateways running, for example?
Yeah, that's what I was just saying. Is this is sort of the first iteration of this. Let people play around with it and make sure that the function works smoothly. Gather some feedback maybe on this kind of stuff. Like, okay, well, how can I be confident that it worked and that the thing is updated and running, stuff like that. And once we've made sure that we've ironed out any of those potential kinks or made any of those tweaks, then yeah, I think this is something that we put on the table so that you can check multiple rows and click a button to update all of them to the latest version. I think that's definitely doable. So
Very good.
yeah, not that anyone would ever have hundreds of gateways. All right. Well, unfortunately, I guess we don't. I got a message from Cody saying this is.
We don't have Cody. We'll circle back.
Yeah. Yep. Sorry about that. Thanks for hopping on, Cody. Hopefully, you enjoyed my explanation of your hard work. Yeah. Right. Anyway, we'll cruise on forward then. So the next feature that I want to talk about is or kind of set of related features is around table row dragging and dropping. So this is something that has been asked about
get your screen
for a while.
Man.
What's that?
We should get your screen up.
Did it stop sharing my screen? Did it?
I think you handed it to Cody and then it.
I see. Okay. Thank you for saying something.
Just your friendly moderator here.
Yeah, it doesn't give you the nice big red border like Teams does. So, all right, good to go now?
Very good.
Cool. So yeah, we have a couple features related to table row drag and drop. And with those kind of related features come a whole lot of configuration options. So we'll kind of talk through some of those and what they do and how you use this. So rather than show you the release notes side of this, I think I'm going to flip over to Fuse, to the screen designer. You can read through the release notes where I kind of explain a lot of this stuff in text as well. But we'll flip over here. So we have a sample screen set up with two tables side by side. In this case, these are both just showing the list of units in Fuse, just because that's a quick, easy data model that was already in the system that had data in it. But you could obviously set this up with anything. Once you click into one of those tables, under the behavior section, collapse some of these other sections, we're getting to a very large number of checkboxes in here. There's a whole set of features around row dragging. So first of all, there's a top level option. When you turn that on, you get a whole bunch of extra options. So fundamentally, in order to drag rows at all, you'll have to enable row dragging. From there, there's a set of features that kind of control what happens when you drag rows and kind of how the behavior, how it acts, basically. So multi-row dragging, well, let's first flip over here and show you kind of what that looks like, row dragging at all. So when you enable row dragging, you get this little dotted drag handle on the left side. So once you have that enabled, you can drag and drop rows within a table and reorder them. That's how that works. Dragging and dropping, very fancy. From there, there's some other options, right? So multi-row dragging lets you select multiple rows and drag them as a group. So that's something that you can turn on or turn off as you need. There's a function or a configuration option for hiding. The configuration option is hide entire row while dragging, but if we turn that off, basically what that does is configure whether you get kind of a preview of the row placed in the table, so you can kind of see that it's showing where the row is going to land. If we select a couple, I think it does the same thing, right? So it sort of gives you like a ghost of where the rows are going to end up, versus the behavior when you have that box checked to hide the row, you just get a little green line that indicates where it's going to put that row, but doesn't kind of reorder things in the meantime. To just a matter of kind of what's better for your use case, what's maybe less confusing for the users. Next up, there's an option for entire row dragging. So by default, with that checkbox disabled, you can only drag and drop from this handle. If you do enable entire row dragging, you can actually grab anywhere on the row to reorder these, and it'll work the same way. Obviously, that might interfere with some other options like the inline editing and things that are coming. So That's why that's a configuration option that you can turn on and off. Sometimes that is great, sometimes that's not what you want. So, and then, so that's all the basic reordering within a table. But then the next set of kind of related features, the next fancy set of features is the ability to drag and drop between tables. So there's another checkbox here. When you check that, that adds a couple more inputs. So if you allow row dragging between tables, there's some configuration you have to do with this table drop zones where you basically say which tables you're allowed to drag rows into. So that handles the situation where maybe you have a production dashboard or something with 4 or 6 different little tables on it, and you don't want people to be able to drag from any table to any other table because it doesn't make sense. So this lets you set up sort of a relationship between these tables that says you're only allowed to drag from the one on the left to the one on the right, or vice versa, or however you want to do that. So this is configured to allow you to drag from the left table to the right table. So if we do that, it'll drag and drop, and you can all the same things apply. You can select multiple, drag and drop. There's another option here that says remove source row after dropping. So you can see as I'm moving things from the left to the right, they disappear from the left table. That's because I have that option turned on. If you don't want it to work like that, you just uncheck that box and they will stay in that left side table. There are some cases where if you want something to only be dragged once, sort of maybe like a scheduling system, you would want to turn on that option and kind of have things disappear from that left-hand table. But if you want a case where maybe you're just kind of associating records in the system and something could be associated more than once, maybe you want to turn that off and have the records stay in the left-hand table or the table you're dragging from as you drop them. Just depends on your use case.
Yeah. Like this would work perfect for like adding processes to a strategy, right? Because you'd have your list of processes and you could build your product routing right there and then drag and drop to reorder the steps. And
yep, exactly. And then obviously on the right-hand table here, we also have row dragging enabled with some of these configuration options turned on, so that once you drop the rows in, you can then again reorder them. Yeah. So this comes with a couple notes from the UI team. One thing is that because just kind of a rendering function, because the column on the left side here is the one with the drag handle, it kind of sticks to whichever column happens to be on the left first, which is a little odd. They're trying to identify a solution for that, but that just is a function of the table. Not entirely sure why it does it that way. Another thing they pointed out was basically this set of features implement sort of the interface side of things. And what this does behind the scenes is kind of edit or change the data underlying the table in the UI. What this doesn't do for you is actually save anything to the database. So once you've kind of enabled the drag and drop features, it's up to somebody who's building the screen to create an action or a web flow that when clicked or when executed will actually save that data or create those records or whatever it is that needs to be done, right? And the reason why we leave that to kind of whoever's building the screen is that really it can be a lot of different things that you might need to do. It's very hard to kind of make it happen automatically. So as an example, even reordering records within a table, exactly how that order is reflected in the actual data that's stored. Maybe there's an order by field on the schema. Maybe it's stored as an array on another record. There's a bunch of different ways that things can be saved. If you're dragging, dropping things between tables, maybe you need to create a record using a mutation. Maybe you just need to do an upsert. Anyway, the point is, this will kind of get the data in these tables aligned with what you expect, and then you kind of have to go and figure out what you need to do to persist that data to save it. Another kind of caveat, and this is really just with the way the system works. When you move data from one table to another, really it copies the data exactly as it is from that left table into the right table. So what that means is if the column names are different or the expected sort of shape of those records is different, then you'll need to implement some additional logic using this onDataChangeTransform, which will run anytime rows are reordered or dragged and dropped, to kind of change the data so that it lines up with what you expect in the table that you're dropping into. In general, I'd recommend just making sure that the column names and the fields are the same on both, at least at a basic level, so that way you don't have to do too much fiddling with it. But for example, if you have name on the left-hand table that you're dragging from and code on the table on the right, it's not going to know how to magically put the name into the code. You'd have to write some little transform there that does that mapping. So hopefully that makes sense. Whew. Lots there. Any questions on table row drag and drop, or do we have any examples of data change? Steven says. I don't know of any. The UI team might have some, and exactly how this works. We'll have to check with Steven. That is. I know also this transform does run in a lot of different scenarios. It's not just for the drag and drop. That is also used when you do any kind of inline editing features, or there's a couple of other scenarios. So that's kind of a more general feature that has been asked for other situations as well. So I'll have to check with him on how that works. So yeah. Any other questions? All righty. So moving on forward then, looking at the next kind of highlight, we're looking at authentication event logging. So I will pull that up. I have to pull that one up beforehand. So this is not a very flashy feature in a sense, but it is kind of really nice to have. Essentially, there is now a system in Fuse that will log any authentication type events, who did it, when they did it, what it was they tried to do. So that means any sign-in, password changes, API key verification, what else? User kind of creation stuff. There's a few other things that fall into that category. So for all of those kinds of operations, it will log that something happened. If it failed, then it will tell you why, right? So for example, here was one from earlier when I was testing a new feature where the gateway failed to sign in because the API key was inactive because I turned it off. Here's another one where a user, again, my user, as I was testing some things, tried to access a tenant that it didn't have access to. So this set of features, this logging here, handles kind of two use cases, right? One is just basic auditing, right? You have this history of all of these authentication attempts, right? If somebody's trying to log in to an account and they're using the wrong password, right, that'll get logged. Or if they're trying to log into an email account that doesn't exist, that'll get logged. So administrators can review those logs and know kind of what people tried to do. And this data is kept for a very long time. I think it's 3 years or 5 years to kind of align with our other auth audit stuff. All of our changes to users and access, all of the audit history on that is kept for, I think, 5 years is what our data retention is. The other use case that this helps solve is this can help IT admins or system administrators help their users, right? So if somebody's trying to log in and something's not working, or the gateway isn't working, or whatever it is, right? The IT admin or the system admin can come in here and review this information and kind of see from a system log point of view, what was happening, and maybe help guide the user to correct what was wrong. Maybe they had the wrong password, maybe they put their email in wrong, maybe the API key, again, wasn't active or something. So this can help administrators sort of debug and address issues that their users might run into. So sort of two sides to that coin that this feature helps address. Yeah. In addition to this full table that has all of the events, there's also tabs on users and tenants and API keys that shows the kind of subset of information for just that one record as well. So if you wanted to see everything that I did on my local user, you could come in here and see that here. So any questions on authentication event logging?
I'm looking.
I don't see any. Yeah.
Long time listener, first time caller coming in here. No, no questions on that one.
No questions. Everybody understands.
Everyone
Perfect.
has been anxiously awaiting authentication event logging.
Telling you, it's truly groundbreaking. Yeah, that's like I said. It's not a super flashy feature, but it's one of those fundamental things that's nice to have, and you know, I'm sure it can help out some of these cases where we have customers coming to us and saying, you know, I can't log in. It's like, well, contact your system administrator, or if they are the system administrator, point them to this screen. I guess if they can't log in, then we'd have to go do that for them. But you know what I mean. Yeah. We can help guide people toward this this new set of logs, this new set of features, so that they can kind of manage their own issues more often, which I know is what we were all hoping for. All right, so under some other smaller highlights, moving on forward, one that's come up, been under discussion for a long time, is the ability to kind of treat any container in the Screen Designer as a button. So we can do that now with this feature called a click transform. So basically, you can just run any little arbitrary transform or script when you click on a container. And then that transform could itself run a Webflow or you know, run a mutation or whatever else it needs to do. So just as a demonstration, I've turned this entire upper filter section into I put a click transform on it. So when you click anywhere on it, it just says clicked. So basically what this lets us do is build UI components that are essentially buttons, and that they do something when you click on them, but have whatever content we need inside them, right? You have the full flexibility of the whole Screen Designer system to go and put, you know, descriptions or text or images or whatever it is you want to do inside your kind of clickable component. So that's been a common request for sort of kind of ties into like you know, larger UI elements, touch screen compatible stuff. You can kind of make things that are kind of cards or like bigger buttons. We've made a lot of progress on making buttons themselves more flexible, resizable, and things like that. But this really kind of opens the door to, you can kind of go wild with it. A couple questions might come up around like what happens if you have things inside the clickable thing. Then I think in general, as an example here, right, if you click into an input that's inside a clickable component, it's not going to click the component, if that makes sense. And that's generally true for anything that is clickable that you put within a clickable container. So if you like are nesting, please don't. But if you're ever like putting clickable stuff inside other clickable stuff, you know, it's going to wind up probably being confusing to users. So just keep that in mind, right? If you're putting sort of interactive elements inside a clickable container, you could end up with this kind of confusion around what happens when you click something inside that container. Hopefully that makes sense. Just keep that in mind. Mixing these things can be kind of problematic or confusing to users. So, but yeah, that's pretty exciting. I know there's a couple cases where I know I'm going to wind up using that. So excited about that one. Any questions on that? Who's on forward?
Oh.
Cool. We're reaching the end here. We're moving on forward at a good clip here. That is a very large image. Why is that so big?
There's a there's a question here. It says, do users always get a pop-up notice?
No. To give you the context, let me pop my screen designer back open. That's just what I had set the click transform to be for that particular example. So I had just set that to show an alert dialog that says clicked. So that's why it's doing that, because that's what
So
I
that
told it to do.
that could be anything you want, some kind of pop-up or dialogue or navigate or run a flow.
Yeah, my general suggestion would be, for anything that's complicated, to do, execute flow and run a web flow. For anything that's kind of more than a single step, I'd suggest using web flows for. And I think in a lot of these cases, they probably will be more complicated situations. But if you're just doing like a simple navigation, or you just want to pop an alert, or just do one mutation, you can just do it right in line in that little action. So yeah. Cool. Moving on forward, then the last feature, again, not the most the flashiest feature in the world, but we've made some improvements to kind of the way we handle and display date time localization and time zone handling in Fuse. For a long time, it's been sort of, I don't want to say ambiguous. The way Fuse has always displayed time zones has been in the local browser time. That's always been the only option, and that's just the way it worked. Which, for a lot of kind of small to mid-sized companies, maybe only have operations in one time zone, is fine. Nobody really knows or cares, right? That's exactly what they would expect. But when we've gotten into some of these kind of larger multinational or global companies that have operations in China and Germany and West Coast and East Coast, that's not really sufficient for them. They really want a little bit more explicit handling and display of kind of what time zone things are in, so that they can help reduce confusion. So to that effect, we have two settings in Fuse now, which I can pull up. Settings, there we go. We put in zones, there we go. So there is a time zone setting, which we've actually had in the system for quite a while, but it's always only been available there for sort of reference, so you could query it out in a flow and use it, which lets you pick from any of these valid time zones. These use a standard list of time zones. It's kind of, they're all typically kind of cities or regions, rather than setting like date time offset directly. You kind of pick the appropriate region. So for example, I have my time zone set to Pacific right now, US Pacific. So for example, if there's a tenant in China, right, you would maybe want to set that to Beijing Standard Time or Shanghai, whatever kind of the appropriate time zone is that pops up in here. And once you've changed that configuration value, all of the dates and times that appear in Fuse from then on will show up in that time zone. So for example, when this says this was created at 2:14 p.m., that's 2:14 p.m. Pacific time. Or 11:20 a.m., that's 11:20 a.m. Pacific time. What that allows us to do is sort of ensure that everything within a tenant is displayed in a consistent time zone, no matter where you are in the world that you're looking at it. Now, that still leaves a little bit of ambiguity open, where somebody might say, I'm not sure which time zone I'm looking at here. And so to solve that issue, we've added a second setting here that says always display time zones. And when you check that box, from then on, every date and time in Fuse, and this applies to tables and forums and everything, will come with the time zone designator. So we've kept that off by default because, again, like I was saying, for all of the small and medium companies that operate in just kind of like one time zone, it's just clutter, right? Having this PST on every single date and time and every single table column, right? It just adds noise to the system if it's not something that you actually care about. But for these larger global companies, you can check that box, or for anyone who just wants to see it, you can check that box, and you'll know, you'll always have that displayed what time zone you're operating in, or what time zone date is displayed in. So I have a little demo here where there's a couple different options. So this option is displaying the setting time zone, and then versus my local device time zone, Eastern time. And then there's also features in Fuse where, for specific cases, maybe we may have the tenant time zone set to, say, Pacific time, but we might know that some data is coming from the Eastern time zone, and so we want to, even though the tenant time zone is set to Pacific, we want to kind of display it in Eastern time for that specific field or record. So we have that ability in Eastern. We have that ability in Fuse as well to provide a time zone to a column or a date field and say, I want to display this in Eastern time, regardless of what the tenant time zone is. So lots going on there. But the short version is, Fuse now handles time zones a little bit more fluidly and displays those time zone identifiers sort of when necessary, or always if you check that box in the setting. And I should clarify, right, settings can also be set not just at a tenant level, but also at a user level. So it's also possible for a specific user to decide, they just like to see time zones always, so they can go turn that setting on. Whew. Look at those time zones, right? Let's skim through the questions here. Craig's been answering them. I appreciate it. List of available functions. Thank you. Yep. Yep. Yeah. So we've got documentation on the available transform functions in the knowledge base in Confluence. So it should all be there. Yeah. Any questions on dates and times? I know people just love dates and times. I'm truly, it is one of the more complicated parts of software engineering, handling date time localization. So
it's super fun trying to get shifts to work and OEE to calculate correctly.
Yep. Yeah, it's always fun when you say, today, what do you mean? Do you mean today Eastern? Do you mean today China time? Do you mean today in whatever time zone you happen to be standing in? Yeah, it's a good time. So and I should clarify as well, when you set a time zone, that also impacts inputs. So it assumes when you set, say, Pacific time as your tenant time zone, that the times you're picking, I put a pin in that one. I'll come back to that. Actually, I think that was something Ryan pointed out to me. Anyway, the times that are displayed in the inputs here, right, are also in Pacific time, so or your tenant time zone. So I think the way this is set up to work right now is this pop-up picker is in your local time, but I think that is something that Ryan is actively working on. So yeah. Anyway, any other questions on dates, times? I think we're good. Couple examples here. I don't know why this screenshot decided to come out super scaled, but yep. As always, there's tons of other small features and improvements and enhancements and bug fixes in the full release notes. There's some new drivers, stuff going on. So suggest giving it a full skim. And if as always, if you have any questions on anything that you see in there, feel free to shoot me a message.
Jared did pipe up and say that he might be able to go through some of Cody's updates for us if we want to circle back to that real quick on the gateway.
Yeah, if you would like to. Yeah, let's get Jared up in here.
I can't hear you guys.
We can hear you.
Well, that's, I guess, the other part of it.
Okay.
Okay,
Switch
well,
you over
can
so
I
that you can
share my
present.
screen?
Should be able to.
Hmm. Oh. Okay, so just to demo the I'd ask if you can see my screen, but I can't really hear you. So
We do see your
Um,
screen.
if you just search for the device gateway, so you search for device gateways, and you select the gateway. This current one is already up to date, but there should be a more recent build one that happened last night. That should have an extra number at the end of it. And so if we just run from the gateway, we click the play button to run the device functions. Go down and you search for the apply device gateway updates. We want to install both the device gateway updates and the driver updates for the devices and hit play. We get a quick response saying that success, and that means that the signal to the gateway has been sent. There was no error in that. Oh, that's a funny error. That just is complaining that success, the response doesn't meet what the front end expected. It's
That's a
something
fun
to
one.
look at. But that should send the signal off to the gateway, and the gateway should be running right now to update the entire bundle pack, and it should get the most updated build version. I don't know if we're going to see it yet, but oh, there we go. And then the updated bundle number came in. So the gateway did update, and you can see that reflected here.
Do you know if the success confirmation is that returned after the update? Well, I guess it can't be after the update is applied, but you know where in sort of the process that's returned?
No.
What stage? I guess I can ask Cody.
Also, the
You know, kind of. Go ahead.
The updates available checkbox is, shows you that there are updates available, and then there's also a checkbox here that lets you set the setting, and this is the auto update, so that if there are updates available, you don't have to monitor the gateway all the time. It just updates when it sees that there's a new update. But
Perfect.
yeah, I'd ask if there are any questions, but I can't actually hear you.
Great.
Let me get my whiteboard out and write on it. Perfect. So that's a little demo of what those features look like. There's also some screen recordings in the release notes. So yeah, that's that.
Right.
Any other questions that we want to kind of knock out? I know, as always, we love it when you guys give us feedback. So if you have any thoughts on these releases, these improvements, also, you know, anything in the platform, any suggestions or positive feedback, also welcome. You know, yeah, send that our way, and we'll try to integrate it into the platform. So
Awesome. Well, thanks everybody. We'll put the recording out there. Get 12 minutes back.
sounds
Get
good.
so much more work done now before the weekend.
So much more. Yeah, 12 minutes, amazing.
Yeah.
All right. Have
All
a good
right.
one, everybody. Thanks for coming.
Thank you.
Yep. Bye-bye.